Hi everyone, thanks for tuning in. My name is Casey Carsel. I'm the artist who created Knobl Hearts, which is the exhibition that's on view in the windows of Co-Prosperity right now. It opened last month and will be on view until mid-January. Thank you for coming along to my artist talk. Leading the conversation today is Sharon Mazer, who is to my left. I don't know if this is accurate on other platforms, but she is to my left here. She is a professor at Auckland University of Technology and also my mum. I prepared a brief bio, which feels kind of funny to be like, my mother is this, but I'm going to say it. The first thing I wanted to say is a fun fact though, and that is that looking at her book results on Google, it feels like often her book covers, like more often than usual, her book covers feature people wearing much less clothing than is the social norm. And I think that's interesting for that to be the case of my mother's books. Titles of these books include Professional Wrestling, Sport and Spectacle, and I Have Loved Me a Man, The Life and Times of Mika. She received a PhD in Middle English Drama from Columbia University in 1991, yes?
Yes.
Which was a few years before I was born, 4 years before I was born. She received her master's from UCLA, which is where she met my dad. And she got her bachelor's at Reed College. And I don't have a fun fact about Reed College that relates to me. But if I'm remembering correctly, Reed College was where LSD was first synthesized. So you have that fun fact.
No, ecstasy.
Ecstasy,
MDMA.
sorry, ecstasy. Oh, MDMA, okay. Where MDMA was first synthesized. Thank you, I'm glad to have a fact checker here. We were going to start our conversation by lighting the menorah for the final night of Hanukkah on Mum's menorah, but she ordered candles and they didn't come in time. So true to form, we will not end up lighting the menorah. We tried. I'm not going to tick off the being a good jukebox tonight. It's fine. This conversation will hopefully go until 7 p.m. CST, Chicago time, which is an hour from now. We're just going to have a chat about the work, about things around the work, and hopefully the last 15 minutes, if any questions come through in the chat on Twitch, I will get texted them and hopefully I'll be able to answer a few of those. But I'll hand it over to Sharon Mazer, the professor, my mother.
Hello, my darling daughter. Hello, everyone. What a strange and wonderful thing to do. I'm sitting here in New Zealand in the middle of the day, and there's my daughter in the darkest evening of Chicago. And isn't that work is so beautiful? It's so I have to have a small quell. I am so proud of my daughter. I am so astonished by her, which I think to me. That's as wonderful as the miracle of the lights or the failed miracle of the candles. I am in New Zealand and getting Hanukkah candles is not as easy as it might seem elsewhere. We titled this talk in a moment of inspiration. We titled this "To You I Can Talk," which is what my great Aunt Bess, and I brought her picture and her spirit along to this. My great Aunt Bess was born in a shtetl somewhere between Ukraine and Poland, and came over through much hardship, survived pogroms and things, and came over to New York in that classic immigrant Jewish story of the beginning of the 20th century. And for her, her life was always a blessing. She just thought, there's a description, her sister Faye, who came over with her on the boat, described themselves dancing when the Statue of Liberty came into sight. She also described all the hardships that preceded that. And so for my great Aunt Bess, life was a blessing always. And no matter what the hardship was, it was the most astonishing thing. And Bess, with her husband Mo, lived when I knew them in the mid-70s, lived in Los Angeles in the Fairfax district, the Jewish district of Los Angeles at the time. And they would walk over to the farmer's market every day, early afternoon, and sit with 6, 7, 8, 10 of their closest friends from shul, and talk to each other, have tea for 2 hours, and gossip. And I was thinking, and the way they would do this, first of all, this blessing, the way they would do this is they would order their tea, and Bess would have it with lemon and sugar. She wouldn't use the lemon, but she would take from her bosom the little purse with the plastic bags specially cleaned because she would reuse them, and put the lemon in one bag and the sugar in another, and then put it back in her bosom. And at the end of every month, she would pour all the sugars into a jar and give it to her daughter-in-law and all of that. So life was a blessing. Life was abundance, to have that kind of abundance, and to have that abundance of friendship, and to be able to chat away. But the thing about being 20 years old and sitting with your great Aunt Bess at a huge table in the middle of farmers market in Los Angeles was that as their stories would get more involved, and they would get to the good parts, i.e. the dirty parts of the story, they would shift into Yiddish. And they would go, and then the excitement would really build, because only in Yiddish could this story properly be told. And it would culminate in this huge cacophony of laughter and joy. And she'd be fanning herself, and she'd have her hanky out even. And then she would lean over and grab my cheek or my knee or whatever elbow, whatever she could get hold of, and pinch it as tightly as she could. And she would go, "To you, I can talk." At which point I would go, "What? I don't understand this. Tell me again." No. And off she would go again into the story. And this would be repeated over the course of an afternoon several times. So "To You, I Can Talk" was always about the way, for me, over, so many years later, what is it, almost 50 years on, 45 years on, the "To You, I Can Talk" is something to do with, first of all, that thread connecting us to the old country, to the shtetls, to that place. The way in which English always failed at the critical moment, and understanding, the real understanding, for me, eluded me. But the sense of belonging crystallized in those moments, not just for them, but for me. I didn't have to understand. I just had to be there close enough to have some piece of my body yanked around or patted or pinched or slapped or whatever, and to be part of that laughter. And I think I've been thinking about this work and how beautiful it is. And thank you, Nick, for showing us right now all the images of this beautiful. It's astonishing, this work, to me. It is as astonishing to me in many, and as revelatory and as mysterious in some ways. It speaks to me and fails to speak to me, makes sense to me and fails to make sense to me, in many ways, in the same way as sitting in this wonderful revelatory way as a young person, younger than Casey is now, a young person who had grown up out in rural Oregon where there were no Jewish people anywhere, a very fundamentalist Christian community, to be searching for my Jewish self, my Jewish identity. I'm going to make myself weak by making Casey weak. I know, here we go. To be finding who I am in this human sort of chain of the most embodied presence, really, where the voice is more important than the words, and the sense of being together in this room was the most important thing. And I still don't know very much Yiddish. I only know really the bad words to describe bad men, which is, I love Jewish for its beautiful range of words to describe men who I'm angry with today. You need this when you work in a university or when you research wrestlers and gay Maori performance artists and things like that, which is sort of where I spend my days. And I still don't understand any of that either. I think that's what an academic does, is fail to understand, but, sort of write it down in the effort to try. So from the shtetl, through my parents, to me, and my parents moving as far away as they could, and to me trying to find my way back, and somehow accidentally having a child in an equivalently almost entirely Jew-free area, such as Christchurch, New Zealand, insisting on a bat mitzvah with a Chabad rabbi who happened to wash up on our shores. Totally strange then again. And to have her take this journey herself back into this place and to learn Yiddish, to make art of Yiddish, to make understanding of Yiddish, that's extraordinary. So I needed to sort of say those things, to acknowledge the work and acknowledge my own, sort of in the same way as Aunt Bess might have felt of me, and certainly would have said, to see the work and to be as bewildered as I think my Aunt Bess really was by me. And to say, you know, and to feel in the same way that my Aunt Bess did, you know, that as long as you're happy, if this is what makes you happy, okay, you know, I don't have to understand. I have to, it's the sense of it is not in, and the sense to make sense of something is not to know, to have it as knowledge per se, or to have it in this rational, literal kind of way, but to have it come to you and to take from it what you can in this sensual and to be provoked and invited without necessarily being having understanding demanded of you is a real gift. And I think that's the gift of the artwork. And I want to make us, I know, we're making ourselves sweet, sorry. We did have a sense that having this with an audience.
This is like the speech, my adulthood bat mitzvah.
This was going to be it.
Yeah.
And then the other, that, you know, I think, and I just want to do some more little, you know, because, you know, the academic in me has taken hold. One of the things that was astonishing about the work that you did here, Casey, at Room, was that was a blue piece on the floor with the garlic and stinking up my apartment with garlic then as well, and all of that. So the first thing is, you know, is like, why garlic? But the second part of that, I think, and in your, you know, what's expressed in these works, that I can see from a distance and can sort of intuit from having experienced the work here, is the vastness of it. I think the scale of it. So there's something about the intimacy of the garlic, the pungency, I'm trying to find a nice word for it, the pungency, even if I can't spell it, and I do have my little garlic here that I keep close as well. And if you're careful, not careful, start showing your baby pictures. The pungency of it, so that immediacy of it, but also the vastness of it, still speaks to me in some ways of journey. It speaks to me of what is lost, both in terms of that place, which is, as we know, has been buried underwater since the 60s, when my grandfather went back and tried to look for the place that was buried underwater, where he was born, because of a dam, a huge dam in the Ukraine now. The vastness of the journey, the vastness of the desire, the vastness of the story, which is, I mean, my story tends to start with Aunt Bess because of the way they left, and because there's nothing there, but it actually reaches so much farther back, and that's what I see in the work. So I guess I have about 5 questions as usual. Pick one. Why garlic? And couldn't it be something sweeter smelling than garlic? Garlic doesn't smell so good as when you go to an Italian pizzeria or something, when you're boiling it in my kitchen, darling. But why garlic? Why choose garlic of all things? How does Yiddish speak to you in this time when, how did you move from or through the sort of ceramic, the explorations of the ceramic. And I do love being able to touch this here. The ceramic to the textile, and why fabric in this way. And how has this long journey that I have sort of somehow been in your shorter journey, young person, from starting in Christ Church, and moving through Auckland to Chicago. How does that, and looking forward to Ukraine, how is that moving you? So pick one and start.
I mean, I love all of them. Thank you so much for your spiel. That was beautiful. If I'm remembering correctly, you ended up not doing a speech at my bat mitzvah because you were like, I say things like this all the time, whatever. And I think you just did my bat mitzvah speech. Thank you. That was belated.
There were
but
plenty of other people
well
who wanted to
timed.
make speeches at your bat
Yeah.
mitzvah.
Yeah.
Plus, your speech was so beautiful.
I
What
wish
could I
we
do?
still
Now
had a
you really
copy
will
of
make me
that.
weep.
I wish we still had a copy of that though. Didn't we like lose it completely? Anyway,
I think
not
it's
the
in a
point.
box somewhere.
Probably
Sorry, we're
is.
digressing. We knew this would
Yeah.
happen. Apologies, everyone.
But I like all your questions. I'm going to start with the journey one, I think, because I think that like reaches the furthest back maybe, and then kind of move forward from there. But I feel like a lot of my work is about these stories, about how not just the stories of my lifetime, but the stories of like my family, of my community, of like everything around me, how they come together to form this present moment. So I feel like, and I feel like that's a very Jewish approach to, oh, my heater just clicked on, a very Jewish approach to seeing the world in general. I actually mentioned this in my artist text about this philosophy of life from a Jewish lens as occurring in concentric circles in which the deepest, most significant parts of history are at their center, and you work your way out from there, but you're constantly feeding back to those previous moments and constantly churning them through the present moment. And so I think I love that you started this talking about that history, because that very much is present to me in this work. I think I just want to go back to talking about the title a little bit and about that anecdote, the To You I Can Talk story. I love this. I am going to give full credit to Mum for this title. I did not think of this. This was her idea, and I was like, whoa, blow my mind. Perfect. Because I think even outside of that anecdote, the decision to be in conversation with my mother for this artist talk, I like that title because To You I genuinely can talk, like mother-daughter relationships aren't necessarily close, but ours very much is. So letting this be a space not in which I, as an artist, kind of like in a very didactic way, send information down the lines, but in which I have this conversation with this person I'm very close with, who knows my history in a very intimate way, and knows history beyond mine, relevant to me in a very intimate way, is a really exciting opportunity for me. And already I'm overwhelmed and so happy I made this decision. I'm so happy to hear these stories again. But also, I think you kind of said this already, but just to emphasize it again, I really like that anecdote of being told these stories you don't fully understand, because they're in a language you don't know, beyond being able to say some dirty words. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say those dirty words, so I won't say those dirty words. They're in a different language though, so I feel like it's okay. Anyway, I like that story. I feel like that story has a real resonance with the work, as you said, of this kind of, it's a very intimate act. It's very transparent and close, but in other ways it's very opaque and distant because you don't have necessarily that full understanding. At the same time, I really love language, and I feel like even if you don't know the meaning of the words, like you said, the feeling of the words is still there. And so like even when I included Yiddish in my work, for an audience who predominantly won't speak Yiddish or read Yiddish, for me who is still very much learning Yiddish, it's not so much about exactly what those words mean, though that adds another layer to it. It's as much about that act of that effort of learning Yiddish. I guess I can talk about Yiddish a bit then. So I started learning Yiddish about 2 years ago. I learned it on and off. I was learning it during grad school, so I was also doing a bunch of other things at the same time. And I now am I allowed to say this in this format? It's except for signing the contracts, it is confirmed. I am going on a Fulbright to Ukraine in 2021. So I've had to switch over to focusing on languages that will help me survive in that context. But Yiddish is always a language that I like to continue to work on and practice, not necessarily for any practical use. I do have a traveler's guide to Yiddish, but I'm not sure how often I'm going to be like lost in a very particular area of Brooklyn and need that. It's not so much about that. It's about learning this another part. The language itself, I think, is a story of the history. And so learning that language to become, I think, closer to that history is maybe wrong, but to better understand that part of the narrative that brought me to this current point. I think it's interesting what you say about languages not fully being able to translate either. Something you said, I can't remember exactly, but it made me think of my favorite poet, Benjamin Fondan, who was a Romanian Jew, immigrated to France, and studied French, and only ever wrote poetry in French. And there's something about that idea of studying a language to write poetry in that language. I have no particular draw to French, but studying a language to write poetry in that language because you think that is the voice that your poetry calls for. I think there's something really beautiful about that. But also respecting the sounds that come from all the different languages that kind of bring me to this moment too is something really exciting. And I'm excited to kind of continue this language practice vein of work actually when I go to Ukraine, studying Ukrainian and Russian for that purpose as well. And seeing how those languages, especially how those languages intersect with Yiddish and how they diverge. I think language is a very political thing, and you can see a lot of where a culture's philosophy comes from and how they approach language structures and different words and how different words tie together. I think that's always really interesting to me as well.
That's true here as well. When I work in a faculty of Maori and Indigenous development, and so if I'm immersed in my faculty, most of them are Maori, most of them will move in and out of Te Reo, which I understand probably as much of that as I do of Yiddish. And so again, that's that belonging without belonging, being welcome, but only to a point, and having access to that way of being and thinking and understanding only to a point. And Bess herself felt that the other way. She called herself illiterate. She could read a newspaper in English and she could read Yiddish, but she couldn't read a prayer book in Hebrew. So language is very important there. She used to apologize, but she was actually, she grew up speaking Russian and Yiddish and learned English as a child and could read a bit of everything, but not enough of anything.
Yeah, I think that actually with Hebrew as well, to clarify for those of you in the audience who don't know what Yiddish is the traditional everyday language of Ashkenazi Jews, Eastern European Jews, whereas Hebrew was the religious language. So traditionally you wouldn't use Hebrew in an everyday context. If you were just talking to someone, asking someone at the store how much that loaf of bread costs, you would use either the local language, so like Russian or Polish or Ukrainian, or you would use, if you were talking to another Jew, you would use Yiddish. And Yiddish literally means Jewish in Yiddish. Whereas if you were praying, as Mum said, reading a prayer book, you would read that and say that prayer in Hebrew. That also makes me think about Talmud and how Talmud, various teachers I've talked to have said they would not study Talmud in English, like an English translation of Talmud, because you would lose so much of the meaning that way. So much of the meaning comes from the precision of those words, especially in the case of Talmud, where you're really deconstructing every single word. If you translate those words and then deconstruct the translations, you're just like not deconstructing the right thing. So something about like looking directly at that source. But the teacher I'm specifically thinking of who said that still welcomed me as someone who doesn't know that much Hebrew. I know more Yiddish than I know Hebrew, as someone who was interested in learning even so. because it's not about having an in-depth knowledge of the language necessarily, though that helps. It's more about being willing to look directly at that language, not trying to trade it off for another language straight away, being willing to look straight at that material and try and make of it what you will and try and figure it out and work together to figure it out. I think is really important. Yeah.
Yeah, language is supposed to be transparent, but it rarely is. And it really is signal for so much else. I just want to shift for a moment because Nick has been showing us the artwork, and I think it's really
first, actually. Sorry, just about language so often means other things, thinking about also the progression up to this point again, because I think it is worth mentioning that before my art practice focused on Jewish culture, it always that's a more recent development, but it always focused on language and the trickiness of language. And so Jewish culture has become a real fulcrum for me.
Oh yeah, that's really true.
Yeah, but it was always first and foremost, I don't know why I'm doing this like politician point. It was always first and foremost about how we live through those languages, how we live through these narratives, how we live through these stories, and however that disseminated to us, whether it's through a recipe, whether it's through a dirty joke, all of those ways. Sorry, I'll let you shift though.
No. I mean, we could keep going there, but I've been looking. We're here to talk about the work as well, and one of the things I've been that's striking me as we keep moving through is obviously you have the text, which is you have these layers of meaning and interpretation, and when I look at the blue, much as I thought here with that different work, I see. I look at the gold and I feel, especially the way it's illuminated, this piece, it feels like it feels map-like. It feels like when you have when you're flying overhead and you see the land laid out in these quadrants. Yeah, very map-like. And the way that our nostalgia for the old country, for the shtetls, which were, of course, dirty and places of oppression and hardship and moments of grace within that, but illuminated through our memory in the way Bess used to tell stories, her sister Faye. I don't remember the brother who's my grandfather so well. He died when I was relatively young, but we do have recordings of him telling stories from 1969, beautiful recordings of him talking to my father and playing the mandolin, singing songs and telling stories. And this is sort of the map of memory, it looks like to me, in this illuminated quadrant kind of way, instead of, and where the Yiddish almost becomes the roads or the pathways that connected the various villages. But if we go around and look at the blue side, that looks like, and I thought this of the other work as well, it becomes like the blue side becomes like what happened when the dam was built in the early 60s and covered that area, that region with water, buried the villages, buried the memory of the villages, but also of the pogroms, of also the Nazis and the purges thereafter. What happens to that memory when it's submerged in water? And then this third panel, which because I'm so far away and I don't see them all together, I've only seen them in images. This third panel in the middle seems to me to be, it seems to be the movement of people itself. And again, I'm far away. I can't study the detail in the way, and I have no idea how close or far away from intention I'm being, but we did away with author's intention years ago in my discipline, so kind of tough. But it feels like the journey taken, and then all of the stuff on the floor and the writing itself are other ways of trying to restore or recall without or to piece it together. Maybe that's the thing, is that effort to piece it together, which comes through in the narrative that you tell as well.
Yeah.
And always that falling short. Is that a fair, do you want to talk about the work itself? In other words, not necessarily from intention, but looking at it now, how do you start to see that? And one more thing, the reality of it, in this COVID-laced world, except for, of course, in New Zealand, where, hello, everybody, relatively safe.
So true.
Looking at it through glass as well, especially at night, translated through these machines that we have, because none of us are in person with each other. All of those intimacies, pulling back, that circles that you're talking about, those circles are present accidentally or not in this work as we see it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I love all of that. I want to say I didn't actually, I wasn't necessarily thinking about the story of that village being drowned when I was making the work. I feel like blue and yellow have become my predominant colors. And that has a basis in the story, but I wasn't thinking directly about that work, that story in this work. But it's really interesting that you point that out, especially because the goldeny, yellowy colors are all hand natural dye jobs, whereas the blue colors are still by hand, but acid dyes, artificial dye jobs that I've done. So it's interesting that that actually kind of matches that contrast. And that kind of does make sense in terms of the way we associate natural colors with like visions of nostalgia and sepia and things like that. But that is still interesting that that kind of ended up relating to that story as well. I think I was interested in the way you use the word recall and then kind of replaced it with piece together, because I feel like I often think about these concepts of nostalgia, like when you're talking about these histories that one can it feels much more comfortable probably to look back on them very fondly when you're not dealing with their very gritty, smelly realities, whatever. And so that it's very easy to fall into nostalgia, and I really try to push away from that. And like recall, yes, and bring back, yes, but I think more than those things, I do feel much closer to the idea of piecing those things together with the present moment, never trying to especially as I move forward in my practice, I think I become increasingly aware of this, trying not to fall into, wow, what an interesting historical time, or like from like, wow, what a wonderful historical time, let's ignore the pogroms and the Holocaust and stuff, to, wow, what an interesting historical time, to, wow, how does this historical time come together to form the present moment, and how can we look at the present moment through this lens and see kind of a fuller picture that way. I feel like there was something else I needed to say, but I blanked already. So if you have any responses to that.
Well, I mean, also, I mean, nostalgia isn't what it used to be. Isn't that the old joke?
I have never heard that, but I love that.
Well, nostalgia, I mean, there's a whole sort of area of theory around nostalgia and its politics, which I don't want to go into here because I'll get it wrong without going back and thinking it through it more deeply. But I mean, isn't this is so beautiful. And you told me, I think it's actually in the piece that you put together of my grandfather, your great grandfather's writing, where he tells the same story at 3 different times and totally changes the facts up. You know, there's no way to know which of these stories is actually true as well.
Yeah.
So there's not.
I mean, I think that as well. Something I think I realized quite early on as well is not just because there's no way of telling, but even if there were a way of telling, I think there's something more important in the telling than there is necessarily of knowing which one is like the true one.
Exactly.
Exactly. I feel like I like to feel gratitude that I have all 3, and not worry too much about which one is the real one, because you can like feel truth from all of them. I also wanted to say I remembered in terms of talking about the pieces as topographies, I think about this a lot with textiles, which actually goes back to one of your questions, which is why textiles. I think about this a lot when I'm putting textiles together, that they do really lend themselves to that, the way that these large works get pieced together from smaller individual pieces of fabric, but also individual dye jobs. That large work is probably, I have never actually counted this before, I'm shocked that I haven't, but probably like 10 to 15 dye jobs in that work, maybe even up to 20 dye jobs in that work. So the way these different moments, and that's like not my very first natural dye job, but my second natural dye job is one of them. Piecing all those moments together in that material process, as well as what goes on top in the embroidery and in the concepts behind those dyeings, that really does, I think, form its own narrative, as you say, that you really beautifully described. So I don't want to describe it again because you really did a beautiful job. But I think linking that into the why textiles question, I think it was a very practical decision to begin with. I had a show, the first show that I presented textiles at, I had to take a plane to get there. I actually did also a metal work that was the exact size, a metal frame that was the exact size of a check bag, because that was the exact size of something that I could actually check. And so like it came from a place of really wanting to create work that was movable practically, but I think conceptually that also makes sense because of the way I can move these textiles are a very similar way to the one way one can move stories and like fold them up. And it's crazy how much space this takes up. You're going to have to translate to meters for me because I literally don't know meters anymore. I'm sorry, New Zealand. But the largest piece is about 9.5 feet by 24 feet. Whatever that is. What is that?
I don't know. I can't. I'm illiterate now in both forms of measurement. I can't do either anymore.
I think it's like 3 meters by 7.5 meters, something around there. So it's a very large work. Whatever metric you're working in, it's a very large work. That fit into my backpack. Like I literally carried that work to the space in my backpack, and then it expanded to take up this entire space. And I love the way that can happen. I remember I went to a traditional Hindu wedding a while back, and there were so many props and like objects involved. And I was like, wow, there are so many things. Like, why doesn't Jewish culture have as many things? And it's because it's like a very like pick up and take what you can take with you and run kind of cultural basis. And so like I think it really works to have these things that can expand to be like whole homes, not homes literally, but like whole spaces, to fill whole spaces, but then fold up and just go to the next place. I think that feels really right for me on so many levels for the work.
We are a people who wander.
Yes, we are wandering.
I had this totally stray thought, so everybody will forgive the Jewish mother moment again, of insisting that you have a bat mitzvah and that you have that you get immersed at some level in Jewish culture while going to an Anglican girls' school, that you still be immersed in Jewish culture, but refusing to teach you to cook or to sew. And then here you are making things with garlic and, you know, making food for people in this, and again, that intimacy of that and the way that's love, and sewing and doing all of these handcraft things that I never taught you myself, which I think is kind of interesting, reaching into that.
I mean, I think it's interesting to think of it in those ways as well, because it's not like you didn't teach me because you were like, these are useless skills, terrible, don't do them. It was like, I want to do these things for you. I will do these things for you, so you don't need to do these things because I'm doing these things.
Oh, that's true. It was.
And so it's kind of like an early way of like, that's like, I learned that this is like a way one shows love, is by like cooking for others and sewing for others and doing these things. These are acts of love as well. And so I guess I just picked that up myself and carried it forward. So I was
okay. I like that. That makes me
want
to weep again.
I didn't think about that until just now, but I think that kind of actually does make sense. As well as things that are just useful to do, like useful to be able to do. And that at some point, I felt like I should be able to do, just in order to live a smooth flowing life. But yeah, no, that does make sense actually.
And Bess used to think about, Bess was very much a Jewish mother. So, and she loved to cook for us. And it was so bad, her food. It was so, really? You know, every Jewish woman has her specialties. So Bess's was vegetarian chopped liver, which is, you know, a thing, as so because it would be parve, so you could have it with a festival. whether it was dairy or, a dairy meal, you could still have chopped liver, which was from memory, walnuts and egg and, oh my God, it was ghastly. It was all chopped together. And
I don't like that.
so it had the texture perhaps of a really robust chicken liver, chopped chicken livers, but it was absolutely the worst thing. And there were a number of other things. Like, I think I can remember barely my mother's mother's stuffed cabbage, and with the same revulsion, but served with such pride and love. And so somehow garlic seems for me to fall into that mode as well, that we give love, and that it's bittersweet. It's not, that's part of it.
Yeah.
That's a necessary part of it. Is not necessary. The necessary part of it is not necessarily that it tastes good or that it smells good or that it even satisfies. That it's like a good Passover Seder, a proper Passover Seder. You better eat before you go something really substantial, because you're not going to eat till 9 o'clock. And the broccoli, oh, I hope nobody from the cousins are listening, but the broccoli would have been boiled and put on the blecha, the metal piece, put over the gas stove so that you wouldn't light, so that the flame could carry on burning. So the broccoli would have cooked for hours. And we would pull it out and say, look how tender it is. Well, it was entirely mush. But there's something about that actually makes me nostalgic, makes me want to weep with the love that was in the room and with which it was served. Even though, and of course, cousin Sylvia's eldest son is a really wonderful chef. They're all really good cooks, the boys. So there you go again. Huh?
Shout out Jeff, the 420 chef.
Shout out Jeff, the cannabis chef. Yes, Jeff Danzer. Cooking wonderful things with cannabis before it was legal. Yeah,
sorry, you go.
No, go.
I think that really ties into the back to the like, it doesn't have to be true for it to be meaningful in one way or another, like to tell a certain kind of truth. I think I guess it brings new light to my standard saying when someone like asks me if there's anything I don't like to eat. I say, if it's made with love, I'll love it. I think that maybe brings new meaning to that, but I think that is true, that it's not about it being 5-star cuisine. It's about it being made with love from my heart to yours, kind of thing. And I think the work is that way as well. It's I'm learning as I go. Almost every dye job that I did of the natural dye was included in the work. I still have a lot to learn with embroidery. I still learn a lot every time I do an installation. I hope there's never an exhibition I have that I don't learn a lot when I install. I think that's really valuable. But it's all on a continuum, I guess, and it's all making it with love for that moment and then continuing on to the next moment and seeing how you can make it different the next time, I think is really important to me in the work as well.
Well, it turns your work from object into action in some ways. I was thinking in theater, especially in this country, often you get theater where it's very flat because they're just looking at a kind of effect that they want to create. But the theater that I was trained in, the Stella Adler, Uta Hagen kind of naturalism, going back to Stanislavski, and citing Aristotle as well, is about action, sort of in that Aristotelian sense, where character is what you do, and that acting is doing, is what we used to say. That what you capture in the work is this act of making, rather than the made thing, if that makes sense. And that's really powerful. So that's what gives it life, not the static flatness of it, but the fact that it's in process and that you've just held to a moment in that process, rather than which one gets the feeling is carrying on then rather than, and that's an ideal in theater as well, that and performance more generally, that this is in motion rather than static, and that it's a form of, that the doing is a way of knowing, and none of that is which is hard to do in a world where we're stuck on screens. It's one of the most distressing things about screens is that they push us towards flatness in a way. And how does one keep that sense of motion of things, that what we see, what we're experiencing, what we're sharing is that moment together as part of a life ongoing rather than held. And Bessie has been gone for, she died soon after I moved to New York. So that would be 35 years. She's been gone, just 35 years. She's been gone. But I keep her image in my kitchen. I keep the picture of her in my kitchen to remind me. And so somehow someone that way of being in the world, that way of doing, I can't cook without looking at her. And of course, it's a cautionary note, because really, please let me not turn out something like that. But also, and I'm sure she made wonderful food, but the food I remember was the stuff that didn't taste good. I'm sure she cooked beautiful food for us as well. And God help you if you got invited up for a cup of tea in the afternoon. Come up just for a cup of tea. And 7 courses later, she's going, what? I don't want you to go home, call your mother and tell her I didn't feed you, would be what she'd say. And she meant it. And I would go, I'm not talking to my mother, because I didn't have this relationship with my mother. I'm not going to call my mother. I'm not going to say to her, only 4 courses, not 5, only 6, not 7, please. And she'd look at me, sort of wait me out. And then she'd go, still here, And so she stays in the kitchen because that life stays with us, right?
Yeah.
That wasn't a question. I'm sorry.
No, I loved it though. I loved it. Loved everything about it. We're getting close to the end, so I need to check.
And we're supposed to be opening for other people to ask questions.
But I do want to say, going back to your comment about the screens and those layers, and also how many people who are looking at this, including you, are only looking at it through screens. I think in the same way, like to speak metaphorically about that, there are so many stories in the world. There are so many stories that come together to make up our present moment. We can never stop to look at them all necessarily. And I think in the same way, I feel like I am really happy with how this work has come out, in terms of there are lots of details that can be communicated and sent through, and that people in New Zealand can appreciate. The texts are international. You can look at those anywhere. Well, I mean, they're still in English and some in Yiddish, so many people can't read the Yiddish anyway. But there are bits that can be communicated across those lines, and perhaps by only seeing those bits, you're getting a different view, which isn't necessarily the wrong view, it's just a different view. But I will say, for the viewers at home who have not seen the work in person, if Nick can also maybe indicate this a little bit, I really enjoy in these windows how you can actually see through the windows to other parts of the windows as well.
Yeah.
So that in the yellow window, you can look through and see the back of the blue piece, and how in that central window you can look that way and also see a bit of that blue. And I think you can look to the left as well and see some of the yellow. So they do like tie together that way as well. And that feels really nice to me. There was actually one of those smaller doors I could have closed, but I decided to keep it open so you could keep on looking at the work in different ways in that way as well. I will see if any questions have come through though. Okay. Yes, we have a 15-minute warning. One question.
I blew that off.
I mean, well, only 4 minutes past, so we have time. It's cool. We have time. We have a whole 11 minutes to say goodbye, which is probably about an hour less than we usually take, but we can make it work. So one question, what was your favorite part of the whole process or processes with the pieces, and why? So many parts. I think I was thinking about the process of making the work again today and all those steps that went into it. And I feel like each one I really learn something from every single time I do it. Like sometimes I think I'm going to get eventually very tired of how much I embroider. I don't even want to think about how many hours I embroidered to make this show. But I find that I feel like I learn so much about embroidery every time I sit down and put something on a hoop, and can really meditate through that process as well, on the work as a whole. Um, I was really excited. This is my first body of work I've presented that included natural dye pieces, and that was a really exciting and scary thing for me. Um, Scary at first, and like now that I've gotten a little more experienced with it, it's a really exciting process to see how I can slightly change things up and how I can adjust and perfect the process as I go. But also installation is always just such an exciting and terrifying thing. I lose so much sleep for like the week before I start installing, because especially with work like this, you can't fully understand what it's going to look like once it's installed until it's installed, because I work out of a studio apartment. Like that large piece doesn't even fit on my floor. Like that, I cannot see that in my own space. I looked at it on the ground in Co-Prosperity a couple of times before we installed, but without that backlighting just changes everything as well. So that was really exciting, and I'm so happy with how it's come together. I got another message. Let me see if that's oh, more questions coming through. But I wanted to ask you if you had any thoughts about favorite part. I guess not of the processes, but of what you've seen of the work. But if you've said so many good things, if you have something to say, otherwise I can move on with questions.
Oh, no, keep asking, answer questions. Okay. I feel like I've talked too much already.
Oh, you've talked so well, though. I love it. Thank you.
Oh, I just want to look at you and your work. So yes. We'll just have that moment.
Also, context to the audience. I very rarely end up, I talk to my mum a lot on the phone, but I very rarely end up video chatting. I'm not a huge fan of video chatting in general, so this is my mum's rare chance to see my face moving and talking while we're in.
It's my Hanukkah present, I figure.
She's over the moon.
And she's been, and also because she's been away for a year. I haven't seen her for a year. So.
Yeah, I was planning on visiting New Zealand again sooner, but I've been in Chicago for more than a year now, which is the longest I've ever been outside of New Zealand. So.
And I was supposed to go to Chicago, but in May, but COVID.
Yeah. You were meant to come for my birthday, weren't you? Or earlier? Yeah.
Just a bit earlier, yeah.
Okay, another question. Can you speak a little more on the ideas of ephemeral moments, particularly in relation to the Jewish diaspora and the way this work is viewed? How do you interpret the time and labor that went into the show when it becomes experienced very quickly, either on the street or through a phone screen? That's
so much smarter than anything I've ever said.
I mean, no, your questions were great too, Mum, but this is A+.
This is next level.
Okay, so I'm gonna go with that first part, which I like being able to read them too, because I feel like I just forget straight away after hearing things. Ephemeral moments, particularly in relation to the Jewish diaspora. I think it's interesting to use the word ephemeral in relation to Jewish culture for me. Somehow I find that word really interesting, because like, of course, anything like can be ephemeral for any culture. Like ephemerality isn't necessarily culturally specific. Maybe I'll regret saying that later. But anyway, but I feel like Jewish people are people of the book. Like I feel like for me, I mean, there are as many ways of being Jewish as there are Jews, so I'm not going to try to generalize for others too much. But for me, Jewish culture is so much about recording everything, writing everything down, holding on to everything that way. Not necessarily believing in it all, because we do a good amount of arguing about those things that are written down. But even if we disagree with it, recognizing that it is and choosing whether or not to hold on to it is still an aspect, I think. And so ephemeral moments can pass by, but I think a defining feature for me of my practice as an artist and in general, and for me a defining feature of Jewish culture in general, is still finding a way, whether it's in words or stories or recipes, to hold on to those moments as well and carry them forward. I hope that was a good answer to your question. I don't even know who asked this question, but great question. I hope that was a good answer. And then the other part of the question was about interpreting the time and labor that went into the show for a subsequent very quick viewing, potentially. I feel like I enjoy that. I like that contrast. I appreciate when people stop and take a lot of time with the work, which they do. But I think there are features, there is value to taking whatever amount of time you want, whether that is a quick glance walking past or not, whether that's a quick glance and then you think about it later and come back to it. That's also beautiful. Something really lovely about having a really long runtime is that that is the case. And that also, like, we can have these talks that add to it, but maybe people aren't party to these talks. Maybe you hear the anecdotes behind the words, maybe you don't. Maybe you recognize the in joke there, maybe you don't. Some of the in jokes are from like one moment I had this summer. Like, you're not going to necessarily, no individual, probably even me, is going to necessarily recognize all the nuances to it. So even if you take a second with it, I think whatever you find, that's still beautiful, you know?
Casey, are those pebbles on, I hadn't noticed this before.
Yeah.
Are those pebbles?
The lower,
like you would put on a grave, or?
No, those are actually some of those
garlic cloves.
Garlic, and some of them are the ceramic garlic works that I had in the Room Gallery show as well, which was an earlier iteration of this work. I did think about putting the pebbles in the show in reference to, for those of you who don't know, there's a Jewish practice, rather than putting flowers on graves, you put piles of stones on graves because flowers die and the stones last. And probably various other reasons as well, but that's the one that I always bring to mind first. I did think about that, actually. That was something I was considering doing, or even like there was a point where I was like, maybe I just fill that whole middle window with just stones. And I think stones are a really beautiful and interesting material in general. But I think in this case, there's also something about them, because that is the connection point for me. It's very, there's a smarter word, but I'm going to say this one, deathy. And of course, history intrinsically has death into it. I'm talking about histories that were wiped out because of mass genocide. I was thinking the other day, I don't think we've ever said this out loud to each other, but the number of Jews that were killed in the Holocaust is more Jews were killed in the Holocaust than people in New Zealand, full stop, which is just like, whoa. Anyway, sorry. But obviously death is intrinsic to talking about history, because people are killed, people died. That's part of this history. But I didn't want it to be about the death. I wanted it to be about those moments other than that. I think this work, even though it mentions the anti-Semitic histories, I feel like it holds a lot of love as well. And I didn't want it to become too nostalgic. I didn't want it to become too tragic. There are so many lines to avoid.
Well, mourning and celebration are really not separate from one another.
That's so true.
I think that's the really important thing, especially in Jewish culture. I think that mourning and celebration are intrinsically linked. One can't actually experience. There's that ambivalence of Jewish life.
I think also it wouldn't have necessarily been the wrong move, but I think to put pebbles in front of the work would have really made it feel like gravestones in a way as well. Whereas even though the focus of the work is the absence of these histories from contemporary, of this particular facet of history from contemporary identity, signification, but I don't want it to be like about life or death. I want it to be about that kind of living continuum, I guess, maybe.
And a garlic clove, which is a living thing, turned in a way through ceramic to stone anyhow. So in some ways it's that way anyhow.
Side by side. Yes, for sure. That's very true as well. And letting the real garlic and the ceramic replicas sit side by side as well is something that I don't know how to, I don't necessarily explain that decision all too often, but it's also really important to me in my head. I feel like it's like, for me, that's me talking about the work as well. That it's like a combination of these actions and these reflections on actions and bringing those things into the same space in various ways.
Yeah.
We're at 6:59.
Yes, we are.
I could go on for years, which is,
what do you want to leave us with?
Oh my gosh, the bacon anecdote. I'm gonna leave us with the bacon anecdote that hopefully maybe we'll go a little bit over, so you can do an anecdote as well, because your words have been so great. I don't want too many of my words. But when I was installing this work, I was thinking a lot about the fact that even though so much of my work is about Jewish culture, very steeped in Jewish culture, I'm not a very good Jew. I skipped Rosh Hashanah this year. I lit candles for 2 nights of Hanukkah this year, which is better than I usually do. I don't keep kosher. There are lots of things that I don't do. And sometimes I will talk to various people, including my mum, about how I feel weird or like maybe not fully real, not doing all the things to be Jewish when so much of my practice is about being Jewish. And my mum once told me this anecdote. I can't remember who it was about, but someone said to her that she recognized herself as being Jewish, not because she doesn't eat bacon, but because she knows she's not meant to eat bacon. And so it's about...
Well, that's every time anybody challenges me for eating bacon, I say,
oh, is that you?
Well, Mary Douglas, the great anthropologist, said, you know, that Jewish dietary laws are about knowing what, you know, knowing who you are because you know the rules, not necessarily that you follow them, but you know them.
Yeah. And so
I think that's...
Yeah, I think that's really important for me personally to remember. But I think that's really significant to me for the work as well. So it's not like I learn about the significant history of Jewish culture in which, of garlic in Jewish culture, in which I find out that it's a mitzvah to eat garlic on Shabbat and things like that. Like, that doesn't mean I'm going to eat garlic every Shabbat. I don't actually observe Shabbat formally either. I feel like admitting all these things in a row sounds really bad, but it's about knowing that and choosing how to carry that forward in my own way as much as carrying it forward traditionally. I think that's really important for me and really important for the work as well. And just observing those things. If you have any closing statements though.
I think that sounds like a good way to close, because we, you know, I think that's the most important thing is not that we treat life as a rule book, but we recognize that there are rule books. There are loads of them that govern us, for better or for worse. But it's our relationship to them and how we enact that every day, and the way in which they come to consciousness, and we decide every day anew, essentially every day afresh, this is how I'm going to be in the world. This is how I'm going to, as you said in your bat mitzvah, I knew I could figure it out. As you said in your bat mitzvah, you said, I don't know what's in front of me, but I'm going to, like Jacob, carry myself forward. I'm going to go forward into that with courage and joy and hope, and knowing what I know today so that I'll know something else again tomorrow. You did say that.
I have no memory of that, but that's beautiful.
And I think that's us.
Yeah.
That's our time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for joining me for this conversation, taking part in my antics. This was really great.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, this has been...
Love you.
I love you. Thank you. And are we going off the air? I don't even know how this closes.
Yes. I think we just pause for a second and it'll do it.
Okay.